5 years ago today, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released 94 calls to action that were guided by the testimony of those who survived residential schools. While the pandemic may overshadow the significance of the day, one storyteller in our province says we can take lessons from the TRC and move forward. And Max Finday says right now a helpful focus would be on young people. Max joins me now. Thanks so much for being here.
Saskatchewan, thanks for having me.
For people who don't know, tell us about Call to Action 66.
Call to Action 66 is really about young people determining the future for ourselves. It calls on the federal government to invest in multi-year Indigenous youth organizations and programs who are trying to build that capacity back into our communities, giving skills to Indigenous young people so that they contribute, so that they can vision, so that they can build back all the things that we lost because of residential school.
Tell us about the Canadian Roots Exchange and how you've been supporting youth since the pandemic began.
I'm very happy, to serve Indigenous young people right across this country through Canadian Roots Exchange. We're a nonprofit organization that works with young people to build skills, to build leadership, to build opportunities for dialogue, to talk about what reconciliation looks like in 2020. Since the pandemic, our work has changed just like every other organization in the country. We've been shifting our focus to support more grassroots level initiatives with the visions and the voices of young people centered in the middle of that. We've been able to help support 50 Indigenous youth-led projects right across the country, trying to switch or pivot their purpose in creating opportunity to learn about themselves in a more digital platform. Now that means that unlike usual summers, people aren't going to be on the powwow trail, people aren't going to be at culture camps. So trying to find opportunities to provide those same teachings, those same learnings from our elders in a more digital platform. It's been a real wonder to see the ideas that young people have.
Why is the focus on young people so important to you?
Well, for me, it's common sense. The fastest growing population in this country, but also in the province of Saskatchewan, is Indigenous young people. And I don't think it'll be surprising for any of your viewers to hear about all the disparity that still exists in Indigenous communities, the lack of opportunities that Indigenous young people have. We have a choice to make as a society. Just like I write in that opinion piece, we need not just the federal government, but the provincial government, municipal governments, unions, and private sector actors to think about where they want our province and our country to be in 10 or 25 years from now. Do they want the more of the same of the pain and the poverty that exists, a lot of protesting that we've seen in recent years, or do they want to chart a new path, one that is based upon peace and prosperity, mutual benefit, friendship? These are some of the expressions that I've heard from the young people that I get a chance to work with. But it's not just up to young people. We need our parents, our aunties and uncles, adult allies across the board to say that this is a vision that they seek too, and they want to invest in.
You mentioned protesting. I wanted to get your thoughts on the conversation about racism happening as protests take place all over the continent.
Well, we are in a moment of difficulty and a moment of hardship. And, this isn't just happening in the United States. It was just, last week that we saw the life of an Afro-Indigenous woman, taken in Toronto, not so far from us in Saskatchewan. I think the Indigenous community can relate and reflect and just like the rest of the province should on how we view and how we can act in solidarity with the Black community, how we can challenge anti-Blackness in our own communities, in our conversations with society. We don't want to get to that point in this country. We don't want to get to the level of protests and violence that we're seeing down south. We have an opportunity not to go down that path, but it means that we have to do a lot of unlearning. It means we have to do a lot of reflecting, and it means we have to do a lot of listening to Black voices and to the Black community right now.
Max, in your piece you wrote for CBC, you wrote about how the TRC was a building moment and how we're again at the beginning of a building moment. How do people come together and recover from all of this?
I think the first thing that we have to do is listen to one another. This pandemic and COVID-19 have really stopped a lot of things in our society. It's really slowed down the economy. You know, a lot of people are at home. You know, there's challenges because of these sorts of things. We're going to need ideas. We're going to need innovation, and we're going to need a more inclusive society. You know, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, not only for reconciliation, but also anti-racism that come from the Truth and Reconciliation's calls to action. And on this 5th anniversary of that, as you know, the son of a survivor of residential schools, I'm certainly reflecting on how I'm going to help build back better. And I hope the rest of the province, I hope the rest of the country can think about that too.
Max, so thanks so much for your time today.
Mountain, happy to be here.
Max Finde is the executive director at Canadian Roots Exchange. You can read his piece at cbc.ca/sask.